Welcome to Six Figure Authors, the show that helps you take your writing career to the next level. I'm Joe Lalo, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Lindsay Baroker.
And I'm Andrea Pearson.
And today we'll be doing the traditional end-of-year look back and start-of-year look forward. We're going to do a little bit of a post-mortem on the things we tried this year. Some things worked, others didn't. But there's always something to learn, whether it worked or it didn't work. So we'll also discuss what our goals are for the coming year. But before we get into that, let's see if there's any news or points of interest to talk about.
I don't have a whole ton of news. This whole week has been absolutely crazy. We've kind of gone every direction, but I did end up printing off my. Did I already talk about this last week? Printed off the whole series in really, really fine print, like 6-letter font, 6-size font, and I printed the entire series off with narrow margins, and it ended up being like 200 or 150 pages double-sided. And what I'm doing with that is I'm going, and this is something I definitely recommend for authors. I'm going through the whole series and it takes me like 10 minutes and I go through each book one at a time for about 10 minutes. And on that, each scene, I'll write a 1-word hint or maybe 2-word hint about what's going on in that scene. And so it just gives me a really quick overview of the whole series, what's happened in the series, what my characters, conversation topics, things like that, and just help me make sure I'm not, letting things go through the cracks. And like I said last week, I am going to do a kind of slight edit change on the last book that I released and then end up releasing only one more book and then tie this series off. And it's been fun. I love doing these kinds of things because it's something I can do around my kids, which makes me feel productive because I can do it so fast. My kids are not dying to get on the computer while I'm on the computer because I print it off. So anyway, that's it for me.
All right. Well, for myself, I sent the last book in my Death Before Dragons series off to my beta readers. And that's book 9. And I just released book 8 today. I haven't emailed my list yet as we're recording this at 6 p.m. So I'm going to do that after we record. So yeah, I'm excited to start something new. I jumped into epic fantasy book 1. I'm about 30,000 words in, and I think my estimate that these will be around 150,000 words is right. So these are definitely going to take longer to write than my urban fantasy novels did. So we'll see. I may end up doing something where I jump around, do a couple books in this, and then do something easier and a little more chill. I know I have a lot of fans at this point that would like to see me go back to existing worlds and existing series and do it more installments. So that's always something I think of. I honestly make a lot more money when I launch an entirely new series and just get all that launch juice and all the excitement, and it's a new book on Amazon and just seems to do really well. It's much harder to kind of get a book 1 selling again if you're doing a new installment in a series that maybe you haven't done anything in for a few years. So if I do go back to some of the old ones, I'd have a couple I have to complete, but if I go back and do new stories or side stories, I'll try to make them stand alone or maybe do a trilogy or something so that I can launch it as if it is kind of an all new product. I also wrote a Christmas bonus story for my readers of my Death Before Dragons series. We're recording this on the 30th. I started working on the story on the 23rd. It was just supposed to be a Christmas bonus scene, but you know how things go on this channel. It ended up being 6,000 words and kind of a legitimate story. I just put that up on my blog. There wasn't any time to edit it. I finished it on the 24th. And yeah, it was really well received. I sent it to my newsletter subscribers and regular readers of the series, just as a hey, I did this for free. You can have it. You can enjoy it. And I resisted the urge to sell anything in that newsletter. I just sent them the link to the freebie. I get to sell them tonight when I email them about the new book. So that's kind of the news here. I will say for any of you out there that get discouraged because things aren't going as well with your new books as you hope or your existing projects, I'm definitely have some of that too. I'm like I said, 30,000 words in. I'm like, these characters aren't very interesting. I'm going to have to make them a little more quirky or fun or something. I've just finished 2 series, 8, 9 books each, and really know those older characters very well. So it's hard to kind of slowly develop new characters and give them personality and everything. But yeah, I'm hopefully confident that as I go back and edit and as I get farther in the story, they will come alive to me more and tell me more about themselves and be very interesting to read about. All right, Joe, I'll pass it to you.
All right. I'm in a similar situation. Last week we talked about how I was doing the open book project, which I have not continued on. I have to narrate a couple of parts of it, and the house has been very busy with the holidays. But I had mentioned how my resolve was weakening and I was almost on the verge of doing another cross genre instead of doing the smart thing and doing epic fantasy. So I made sure this week I sat down and actually plotted out some epic fantasy. So I've got the framework of my next series. Next year I will be launching a new epic fantasy, not a Book of Deacon story, a brand new series, brand new setting within the epic fantasy. And it's funny because this is the first time I have returned to a genre that I've been to before to write something new in it. Like I've written some short stories that are in the same genre as other stuff, but that doesn't count really. So this is the first time I'm going to make an entirely new series in a genre that I already wrote a series in. And it's weird because I already wrote my epic fantasy, you know, like the epic fantasy I wrote was what I would have written if I was going to write an epic fantasy. And now for the first time, I'm looking at it and trying to make sure that I don't retrace my own footsteps, which is something I've never concerned myself about before, because even if I did retrace my own footsteps with things like, minor plot points or characters, it didn't matter because it was in sci-fi in one case and epic fantasy or steampunk in another. So it was still drastically different. But now if I repeat myself, it'll be very clear that I'm doing so. So I've been it's been an interesting challenge, but I'm really getting excited about it as I was discussing it with some family members at Christmas. So I think I'm coming in at a good angle.
Just before we go into the topic, I wanted to comment that I think you'll have a lot of luck with it because your epic fantasy readers of Book of Deacon will be like, finally, Joe is writing in our genre again. Because I feel like with the urban fantasy, I finally gained traction that now if I did a second urban fantasy series, I get all those readers because I had that with the high fantasy, epic fantasy, and then I did somewhat also with the space opera. When I did a second space opera series, it's like the readers of the first one were like, yes, finally, we like the sci-fi, not the fantasy. And, it's great. You get some people that will read everything and they're awesome. They're your super fans. But I think you'll find, as I have, that you get a lot of people that they have their genre. They will read you if you write in their genre.
Yeah, and this was already my strongest genre, so I'm hoping that between actually having something new, like a new starting point, and also being better at marketing, I'm hoping that this will be a pretty good, this hopefully will make 2021 a pretty strong year for me if I do it right. Okay, so I'm the one who's hosting, so I should probably just launch us into the topic, shall I? So we're going to start with, like I said, it's going to be a look back, look forward. And we're going to be looking back at what went well in 2020 for our first section. So, Andrea, let's get started with you.
What went well in 2020? Anyway, sorry. Sadly, not much went well in 2020. We were under quarantine at the end of 2019, all the way through our own family quarantine, all the way through the end of March, which is when the whole world went under quarantine. So it was just kind of everything was really crazy. But I came to the realization that writing wouldn't be happening nearly as often as I wanted to do. I wanted to do it. And honestly, I don't know, when I gave myself permission to stop feeling guilty, and when I took a break from my newsletter list, which I'm still on break from, which is so wonderful, I felt more confident about my business goals than I have in a long time. Well, basically since my toddler was born, because he's our most difficult child. His health issues and personality, he refuses to eat. I don't know what is wrong with him, but he refuses to eat until he's full. And then he doesn't sleep because he's hungry, and he refuses to eat when this is just a constant cycle. I mean, he's lost weight again in the last 2 months. And I just, anyway. And then of course my own health issues have really put a strain on the business. But I let go of that expectation that I was going to be productive. And honestly, it made me feel really good. It just made me that calm, that peace, that release, that I was like, you know what? I cannot control the situation right now. And so just recognizing that I was out of control, I'm just so out of control that actually gave me a lot more confidence and a lot more peace than I felt in a long time. And a lot of it is I'm still making money, even though I'm not doing anything with the business other than as much, the writing and the little projects that I've been doing on the side. And so it's really good because I'm not emailing my newsletter. I don't know I spent like 2 months maybe since I last emailed my newsletter, maybe more than that. And I'm still making money. Not that same boost whenever I let out an email, but anyway. And then and then I've been able to focus on courses this year, and that's given me a nice thing to think about and research on, because that works better around my schedule with my kids and with homeschool and things like that. And so I'm not having to, you know how it's like there's like a 20-minute phase before you start writing where you're trying to get in the writing mode, and once you do, you can get in and out of it better and easier for the rest of the day. That 20 minutes doesn't happen very often anymore. And some people are able to jump into it really fast, but they keep the story at the forefront of their brain, and I haven't been able to do that with the challenges that we've been dealing with. And so, yeah, so just coming to the realization that writing wouldn't be happening nearly as often as I want it to has made me feel like 2020 sucked, but it could have gone a lot worse if I hadn't let go of that that expectation.
All right, so it was a pretty rough year for me too. I think it was a pretty rough year just in general. I think we can all agree. But if I'm honest, the things that made this year rough, besides the global things that are making it rough for everyone, weren't so much about things I did that went poorly, and we'll talk about those later, but just things I didn't do. Like when things went wrong, it's because I wasn't doing things I should have been doing. But but we're talking about what went well. So, as you'll recall, at the beginning of 2020, I said I was going to make it to year 6. I was going to write the sixth and potentially final book of all 3 of my main series. They had been running. Well, I mean, Book of Deacon had been running for 10 years, and it was, time to start something new, like I discussed earlier. So if we set aside the possible implications of putting out book 666 in a year that was plunged into tragedy and chaos, it went pretty well. I managed to get all 3 of those books out, which was my primary plan, is to make sure that I actually completed them. And they were all received very well by fans. I didn't have any real complaints, the odd, 1-star review that every book gets, but generally speaking, the fans really liked it. Most of the time, what they were saying to me about how much they liked it was they were hoping that it wasn't actually the end of the series. And because of the way I write things, and because these are 6 very long books in the case of most of these, there are always dangling plot threads that I could potentially dredge up and write more in the future. So they're making those. They've got a tally of all of those that they want me to readdress. But clearly, they're still enthusiastic about the stuff, and that's always a good sign. Considering these were book 6 of each series and targeted entirely at existing readers, the staggered price drop, which was the technique that I tried for most of these launches, which is, I would drop the price of the entire series, with the earlier books being dropped more than the later books. Combined with stacked promotion, it actually worked really well. In the month that I launched the book, my earnings basically doubled for that month. And then for about the next 2 to 3 months, my earnings stayed about 20 to 30% higher on that series. So it was a nice boost on the day, and it was on the month, and it was a reasonably good long tail. So both ways, I think it worked out pretty well. I'm not going to be able to use that promotional technique anymore because I'm going to be starting a new series. But once I get to the end of the series, I know I can try to revive it in this way too. Plus, I'm eventually going to be extending my urban fantasy series, and I can pull the stunt then too. I think it works pretty well. This was, by the way, a David Gaughran idea. It's not like I revolutionized anything. Also, Patreon. Basically, 2020 was the first full year that I was running a Patreon, and it has not been a gigantic financial asset, but I kept it going. I didn't miss a month, which is nice, and that meant that I've been producing something fresh every single month, which, I mean, to a small degree, it's like I had 12 releases on top of my 4, I think, main releases. So my audience was always chattering about something new, and I think that was useful. Plus, I got 1 extra release out of it because I did a collection of the short stories from the previous year. So I think that the Patreon has been a good thing for me, and I'm going to keep it going. I just released a new book 3 days ago, a new story 3 days ago, also as a result of Patreon and my tendency, as Lindsay said, to overwrite. I think I ended up releasing 2 standalone novellas that were supposed to be short stories for Patreon that got out of control, and I ended up just selling them as their own releases. So I added a couple more releases into my minor releases into my schedule as well. There's also the seeds of probably another 3 series. Like the urban fantasy series started as a Patreon story, and there's a handful of things that I've been writing that the audience wants me to turn into a series. I got one that's like post-apocalyptic that I've already written a sequel story for. I've got the cross-genre thing I was talking about last time, which is dragons and spacesuits that people are always already talking about. They want it to be a full series. So it's been a very fertile ground for coming up with new ideas. So again, Patreon, I'm happy that I did it. I'm going to keep doing it. And it doesn't cost me any money because the amount of money that I make, I calibrate it. So the amount of money that I make is the amount of money that I spend. So it's basically a break even. Other things that worked out well, NaNoWriMo, once again, successful. I think that's 7 or 8 years in a row that I've done a NaNoWriMo successfully. That makes me feel good. Again, I'm powered by streaks. So when I have a good streak going, I like to keep it alive. And I guess the other thing that I think really worked out well this year, I mentioned it in an earlier episode, was Habitica, the to-do list software that I've been using. It's been a real asset, not just for keeping my biz, like my book biz stuff arranged, but also my non-book life stuff, because I had a terrible tendency when I was being very productive in my book life, everything around it would suffer. And so Habitica sort of kept everything sort of in front of me so that I knew if I was missing stuff, I could catch up. And it's an auto refreshing to-do list that also gives me little imaginary goodies if I do a good job. So it's a source of additional endorphins in a year when I was sort of short on them. So I think that was a big win too. And I think that sums up the things that worked out well this year.
Do you think that by doing the Patreon, you kind of feel this pressure, like in a good way, to get stuff out every month that you might not otherwise feel?
Yeah, it absolutely does. It's always sort of, and also helps me plan ahead because I always I have a pipeline of stories. So not only do I should always be putting out new words even during my downtime. It gives me a palate cleanser because it's new words that are not what I've already been writing. And also I get sort of have a look forward and see like, oh, I should probably sit down and plan some more short stories. So it definitely, it's like a built-in deadline that, like, I always have a deadline. The 27th of every month is a deadline for a story. So it keeps me moving even when I don't want to be moving.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I make dates with my editor, and because she's also busy and I gotta like make sure I get my slots. But then I always feel like I have to have something for my slot. So there you guys know the secret to productivity is external pressure. I think we talked about that in another episode, not wanting to disappoint other people. So 2020 for me, which seems weird, and honestly I feel kind of guilty about it, but it ended up being my highest grossing year to date. I haven't calculated all my expenses yet and won't until tax time, but going over things, I spent a little more on cover art than usual. Also spent more than usual on the series launch of the Urban Fantasy for about 3 months on ads, but I spent less in the second half of the year. I didn't have any cover art to order, and then I basically just kept ads running on the book one in that series. So I spent less in the second half of the year than I did last year because I had 2 box sets going last year. So I think it's going to be I spent more, but I made more, and I'm still going to end up profiting more from the year. And that's always fun with taxes because you get to pay extra. But what, I thought it was surprising to me, both because it was a distracting year, that I managed to be as productive as I could be. I don't have as many distractions as a lot of other people, so can't complain there. It was just one of those, how it was, doom scrolling, looking at the news, COVID, and then we had the wildfires out here in the West, and it's like, what is going on this year? Presidential elections, all that stuff. And also I know when I launched Urban Fantasy, I think I talked about this in March or so, it definitely wasn't like my highest grossing months, those 3 months on Amazon. The series is in KU, so I was mostly looking at Amazon. It wasn't as good as like my Heritage of Power series. I think even my Fallen Empire series had done better. So maybe it was like third or fourth with series that I've launched since starting to launch things in the KU. Earlier than that, stuff was definitely not as high. I just in case it's useful for you guys, I'd like to make kind of a laundry list of like, why did things work well? So hopefully I can do it again. Some of it was kind of having a good tailwind coming into the year with the 2 box sets I did. Had 2 complete series box sets of 5 each that I was running for 99 cents, running ads to, and they were in KU, so I was making all the money from the page reads. And those were going while I was working on the first 3 books in the urban fantasy series, which I actually started in November of the year before. So usually if you do the rapid release, even if you write quickly, like I write fairly quickly, you have a gap, right? Well, you got to write the first 3 or whatever for the next series. Well, so you have like 3 or 4 months where there's nothing coming out, or more if if you don't write a novel a month, which is kind of normal. So I didn't have as much of a drop off while that was going on. And I also managed to publish 11 books in 2020. I looked back, it was 8 in my Death Before Dragons series, 2 to wrap up my Star Kingdom series, and then 1 Death Before Dragons prequel novel, which was quite short by my standards. I think it might have hit 60,000 words, but we'll call that a novel. And like I said, it's a bit of a cheat because I started writing that series a couple months before the beginning of 2020. So that just kind of happens. Some calendar years end up having more releases than others, but this was more than usual for me. I think I usually have 9 or 10, and this was 11. And just to be clear, you don't have to write that many books to make 6 figures. I'm well above that now. So this is like, I'm kind of feeling like a small publishing company at this point. And, it's sort of, I'm basically writing and launching a new series and completing it almost every year. So will I do that indefinitely? I'm sure I won't. I'm not looking to retirement exactly, but that's kind of the goal, is to get everything lined up so that I can be financially independent and not care anymore what I do or how many I write, but I will definitely still write. And I'm still having fun with it. At this point, it's just that I try to take time off, and then we have this crazy year where you can't travel or take vacation. So it's like, well, I might as well stay home and work on things. And maybe I'll get to take time off at some future date after we're all vaccinated, hopefully. I also was kind of lucky, actually completely lucky, in that I plan to do a relatively simple series this year with shortish, for me, books of about 80 to 90,000 words with 1 POV character. So these were like way simpler than my Star Kingdom books, especially those last 4 or so, which a couple of those broke 150,000 words and were quite complicated with like 6, 7 point of view characters. So I would have been missing deadlines this year for sure if I had been doing the kind of longer, more involved books with more POVs. Another thing that helped, like, even though the series didn't launch to great fanfare, especially because COVID basically took off right as I was launching it. I think I put the first one out at the end of February, had the second, and that did pretty good. I did it at 99 cents, and it was like, yeah, it's selling. It's like 120 in the store for however long. And then COVID kind of mid-March for the second one and third one, like that month, things tailed off quite a bit for that series. Like it was still selling fine, but like I'd see other ones that launched at the same time were still killing it. I'm like, oh no, mine's dropping. And like I said, it didn't make as much in the beginning months as some of my other series had. And this was my first foray into urban fantasy, so I didn't have high expectations, but you always hope, that things will do really well. Sorry if you hear clacking toenails. I have an old dog walking around behind me on the floors. But what I found is that once I boosted the price up to $2.99, and I made sure I pulled back with the ads, but I was still running the ones that converted pretty well. And it was nice this summer, whenever it was, when Amazon started showing the page reads that you were actually getting for the ads, that helped me kind of figure out which ones weren't working and which ones were effective and that I should keep running. And I found that with this series, the ads converted pretty well, or at least better than some of my other series, like my Star Kingdom series. Love that series. It's a fan favorite, but boy, as soon as I decided to do like a robotics professor for the hero of my space opera series, I was like, yeah, this is not going to be to market, to trope, anything. And the blurb for that first book is very much not standard space opera fare. I don't know what it is, but I tried it a little different on the box set, but it's still, that series is not really do that well with ads. I mean, it did fine last year, but it was not a stellar seller for me, and it hasn't converted all that well when it comes to ads. And I think there's a little mismatch too with the blurb and the cover, but that's what happens when you order your covers long before you actually write the book. So like I said, I've managed to keep the book selling pretty well. Again, thanks to the ads converting pretty well. And we're up to 8 books now in the series. So there's quite a few for them to go on and get at $4.99. And because these aren't that long of books, and they're never really stuck super well. They didn't get a lot of like all-star bonuses and things like that in KU. I'm only partially in KU. Most of my stuff is wide, so I don't have as much stuff in there as some people that get those, and I'm not in as popular genres for the most part, but did perfectly fine, no complaints. The last thing that kind of helped out with this year was that I think when COVID came along, a lot of people were like, I'm not sure financially what's going on. So they were looking in the freebie lists, especially on Amazon, but on the other stores as well. So I got a lot of extra downloads of my free book ones, especially my Dragon Blood box set, books 1 through 3, which that one's free sometimes. Sometimes it's $4.99 or something. And it happened to be free. And that one was just getting a lot of love, like for about 6 months, maybe March to the end of August or something. And that really helped that particular series have a really good year, even though it's a 6-year-old series. So it had a better run than usual this year. This is just kind of to say that the more stuff you have out there over time, the more chance you have of just kind of some luckiness or oddness happening. That was not anything I paid anything. I don't even think I got a book bub. I think I maybe had 2 book bubs this year and not on that series. So I've definitely gone down with the ability to get book bubs. They've kind of seen all my stuff at this point. Like they'll do it when I first took something wide, I was able to get one on that. But they've seen all my stuff, or it's in KU and they're not that interested in it. So I'm still happy to apply every now and then, and you never know, I'll take them when I can get them. But for me at this point, it's not that crucial. But yeah, so those are the things I think that worked well, either through design or luck, that worked well for me this year. So I will pass it back to Joe. Do you want to announce the next topic before Andrea talks?
Sure. So that was what worked well. We're going to be moving on now to what didn't work this year and what lessons we learned from them. So Andrea, take it away.
Dang it. What didn't work well and what we learned from it? How am I? Okay, so
I think Joe added that in. That's not actually in my notes.
It's not in the notes. It's
You were
I will
supposed
tell
to
you what
learn
I learned
something.
from it. Yeah.
I learned something. Okay, dang it. Anyway, okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we got quarantined before COVID hit, and so most of what didn't work well wouldn't have worked even if things had been different. The biggest area of life that got affected outside of my son was in-person events, author events, and I really, really am sad that those didn't happen. I'd planned to host several gatherings. You guys know that I was planning to host several gatherings that would have had a marketing focus, and I'd hope to start a mastermind and to travel to a bunch of events. And none of that happened, and I didn't have the time or brain power to organize anything online. And besides, I don't know. This year was very hard for extroverts, and all the introverts out there are like, "Yay, a year for us!" And I'm like, I know. I'm married to a severe introvert, and anyway, so what I could have learned from it, maybe honestly, I didn't spend a whole lot of time this year having help from like external help. I kind of burned out on having babysitters come and help for a couple hours here and there. And honestly, I probably would have gotten a lot more books written if I'd continued doing that. But I don't know, I burned out on having somebody else coming, even though it was only for 4 hours, 4 hours a week, 2 hours twice a week. I just kind of burned out on it. And so I think that would have definitely helped the business go better. And what could I have learned from that? I needed to finish my series. Like I really wish. So now we're flying my niece in to help with the kids for a whole week so I can get the series finished. And it would have been nice to have finished the series earlier, because if it's a series that's not going to earn money, then I should have just tied it off and gotten on to other projects. But again, I did have a lot of personal things, health issues and my toddler to deal with. And so maybe I didn't learn anything. I don't know. Okay. Who's coming next? Joe, your turn.
Me, yes, the guy who accidentally put a pop quiz into the notes. So yeah, in my case, as the year started to wear on me, I completely dropped the ball on advertising and promotion. Now, like I've never been the absolute champion at advertising, and certainly not in this group, and just in overall, I have brief moments of being good at advertising, and then I drop the ball. And the thing that really didn't work out well for me this year is that because I didn't take the time to really cultivate an evergreen ad, or even sort of get into the habit of refreshing my ads, once I started to lose any motivation at all, it meant that instead of just not having very good advertising, I went to having basically no advertising. As I speak, I have a grand total of 1 ad running across my entire catalog, and it's because I forgot to turn it off a while ago. Turns out it's still making a little bit of money for me, so good job, Lazy Joe. But yeah, it just didn't work out. And also because I was sort of letting things slip, by the time Big Sigma 6 came along, which was I believe the third of the three book sixes that I released, I didn't even get I didn't even do the legwork to do the fancy stacked promos for that release as I did with the previous ones. So it had an okay release. And, like, I'm not upset. It certainly made, it made the money that it needed to make. But I just let my lack of motivation leak into not just the creation of the art, but the doing of the business, and it had its impact. So, and here's the big thing is, because I let all that stuff bottom out, now I'm at the bottom of a treadmill that I'm going to have to not just start running on, but start accelerating on in order to get all that stuff back up to where I need to be to keep me afloat while I do the rest of the stuff, like when I get the next thing ready. So just overall, I just did not keep as close an eye on my own advertising productivity as I should have. So that didn't work out well for me. In terms of things I tried to do that didn't work out well, I made a brief attempt to do some of my own book narration. I narrated, again, Patreon. I took some of my shorter Patreon stories and I narrated some of them. And I mean, I produced something I would say minimally sufficient. Like, I'm sure if I was to have released it, like, it's too short. I would never release it on Audible, because it's just too short to be of any value there. But if I had submitted it, I'm sure that it would have met their criteria. But I could tell that it wasn't as good as my other stuff that's been professionally done. So I learned from that if I'm going to actually try to do like narration for other stuff and eventually get to the point where I'm going to be selling it, I'm going to have to put a little bit more effort into setting up a place for recordings. I'm going to have to sort of do better sound isolation and just generally get better at the production end of audio. So I suspect you won't hear me being an audiobook narrator for anybody in the near future. So yeah, that didn't work out so well. And again, that's the useful lesson from that is that I know that I have, number one, obviously I've been doing a podcast for a while, so I know that I have the speaking chops to be minimally fascinating for an hour at a time, which is all you really need. But I also learned that I do have the necessary skills to do some self-production. So I definitely learned, but I also learned that I have a long way to go before this will be a real thing.
You are fascinating to us, Joe. Or they're just here to see your figurines in the background. But
Maybe a recent addition, but I'm sure they're excited.
probably not the audio listeners so much. But those 10 people on YouTube, they're into your figurines. For people on YouTube, I also got a shelf, and then Joe brought his shelf out at the same time, and I had like shelf envy. I was like, I put some books on it, there's some art, and I can't compete with big custom figurines of your own characters. All right, so basically what I put in this section is less what I learned and more like I think what we learned collectively as authors and publishers and in this industry. The basics was that if you've been marketing digitally, you were really ahead this year. And if you were kind of the traditional publishing, going to conventions, going to signings and stuff, these guys really had to pivot. I think during March when everything sort of exploded, it was scary, not just from like, are we going to die from this? I mean, didn't know how bad it was going to be. I knew as an introvert, unlike Andrea, I had no problem holding up for the year, which is pretty much what I've done. But yeah, you feel like, yeah, I don't know if writers are more empathetic than others, or everybody's empathetic, but you are affected by other people's being distraught and in pain. But yeah, so but and I was kind of bracing for the worst. I don't know about you guys, but I was like, oh man, the economy is going to tank. And we had never really, as indie authors, all of us have been in this about 10 years. Everything's been going pretty good during the last decade. So I was like, I've been like waiting to see, like, will sales drop in half? How will it be? But I don't know, we had this weird K-shaped recovery where basically some people got screwed and are continuing to be screwed, but other people weren't affected. And beyond and above that, they actually had more disposable income that because they weren't able to use it on anything. Nobody could travel, go to concerts or sporting events or bars or anything else outside of the home. So they spent it on online shopping, which fortunately included ebooks. I know I lost a few people on Patreon. They said notes, they said they weren't working, they can do this for now. So it's not like it didn't affect readers at all, but overall, I certainly saw that people continued to read books, and it's good that with ebooks we are able to price very inexpensively. We do the free stuff, or you might be, if you are in KU or other subscription programs or libraries, obviously people can get your stuff very inexpensively that way. So it's like, even if people were distracted and maybe not reading as much at first, it seemed like by April, May, the readers came back. At least that was my experience. I think traditional publishing, like I said, they kind of had a pivot in a big way, and it'll be interesting to see if they continue that pivot or if they kind of go back to the old ways. Um, as indies, we weren't really doing conventions or in-person events to sell books anyway. We could never get in the bookstores, so it didn't matter much that people weren't visiting them, except as us wanting to see the industry as a whole thrive. And I'm sure nobody wants to see bookstores go away. But for anything doing the traditional route, you really had to think, okay, I really have to focus on digital marketing and keeping in touch that way. So hopefully a lot of people learned that this year and are working to do that as much as possible. I do think it's a bit of a question mark if things will go back completely to normal and if there'll be a huge return to shopping in bookstores and other stores and going to in-person events as much. I'm sure it will recover to some extent, but I don't know about you guys, but when I got my first e-reader, um, there was no going back. I realized how much easier it is just to shop from bed at night and get the book delivered to my Kindle or iPad, whatever. And I think I've purchased maybe 3 physical books from physical bookstores in the last 5 years, and it was basically to support local authors doing signings. So whatever you're doing digitally, I think keep doing it. And if you haven't started, it's a good time to start. But yeah, hopefully you guys, none of the folks listening are relying too much on that, on the conventions and stuff. I know it's a big blow to artists who make a lot of their money that way. But yeah, I think we've learned that you really have to be creative. And the more you can do online, the more people you can reach, the more effective you can be. Like, I can get thousands of people downloading a free ebook in a month versus trying to hand sell that at a convention or book signings at a store. So I guess those are my rambling thoughts. Joe, take us into the next section.
Okay, so we're going to finish off today with what our plans are for 2021 and why we're planning to do those things. So again, Andrea, over to you.
Our plans for 2021. I'm actually really looking forward to 2021. I mean, it's starting off on a better foot than 2020 did. And I kind of feel like it's because I have a better grasp of my toddler. He's just going to be a freaking pill all the time. Anyway, so my goals, oops, as I hit my mic, my goals involve staying sane and figuring out how to be productive even with my toddler and homeschool. So I've got some specific goals and I've been thinking about these a lot. Like these are areas, like problem areas basically that I've been dealing with for the last long time. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to actually do it and it's going to be good. And anyway, so one of the things I've been struggling with is getting to bed on time at night. And by on time, I'm a morning person. And when I go to bed at like 11, it kills me the next day. And I've been going to bed at 11 a lot because it's the only time I have that's quiet. So, and I'm not productive during that time. I'm just like, it's quiet during that time. And so what my goal is to be in bed around 10 o'clock every night. And I'm needing extra sleep right now because the kid's been waking up and because of the problems I've been having with health. And I'm just not sleeping well. It's just not quality sleep when I'm in bed. And so staying up until 11 and 11:30 has made my mornings horrible. And I don't get a handle on the day until like 10 o'clock in the morning. And for a morning person, this just makes me feel just absolutely awful for the rest of the day. So my goal is to actually get to bed when Nolan goes to bed, and he goes to bed around 9:30, and I'm just going to sit on the bed and write in my journal. And that's another thing that I didn't actually put in my goals here, but I stopped writing in my journal, and I've been a journal writer since I was 8. So I have like boxes and boxes of journals that are very entertaining. I stopped doing that because of stress. And so I've been writing in my journal again for the last week and a half, and it just makes me more productive. And I don't know how that works, but just knowing that something somewhere has everything written down in it, it makes me feel better. Anyway, so I go to bed when Nolan does. I'm not really going to bed. I just sit on the bed and write in my journal, and then I go to bed at 10 o'clock. And then I wake up an hour, and these are my goals. I'm not successful every single day, but waking up an hour before the kids get up. And I know that for people who don't have kids, it's hard to, and Lindsay understands you. She has dogs, right? And I think Joe probably understands because he has a nephew that interrupts. And so like you can't sleep in when these little things depend on you and they're like, feed me. I have a caveat on that in a little bit from one of my other goals, but so waking up an hour before the kids get up. My kids are up around 8 o'clock every morning. I'm really lucky that I worked really hard and sleep trained them so they wouldn't wake up at 5:30 and 6. They wake up around between 7:45 and 8:15 every morning. And so if I'm up an hour before they are, I'll have time to shower, change my clothes. This is something I'm embarrassed to admit. Sometimes I'm in my pajamas until like 10 in the morning and 11 in the morning. And this is not how I was before kids. Holy cow. And then plus get in a little bit of time on book projects. And that honestly can change a day absolutely completely. So these are like really, really important things. If you're dressed and ready for the day in the morning right away, it just changes the whole day. Okay, then my next goal is to teach my daughter to take over for an hour in the morning. She's 8 years old and she can cook a bunch of different things. She's really independent and she's very reliable. And she's getting good at getting breakfast for herself and the other two when I'm sick or when our toddler has kept me up for most of the night. So, and I'm going to formally teach her, get up, change your clothes, brush your hair. I was going to say, do your hair and makeup. She ain't wearing makeup yet. Brush her hair. And then get the other kids dressed and eating. And she loves doing it. And I pay her and it just makes all of us happy. And so my goal is for her to have breakfast and chores done by around 9 o'clock in the morning. And by that point, I'll hopefully have gotten about 2 hours of book work in, depending on whether or not I had to shower. Because living in a desert means you can't shower every day. Otherwise your skin falls off. And I'll be ready to start homeschool. And I don't eat breakfast. I'm not a breakfast eater. So don't worry about that. Anyway, so like I said, I'll pay her like a babysitter and consider it a business expense. And I've done that. I did that a couple days last week. It worked out really, really well. And then the last thing I'm trying to work on is exercising and watching what I eat. Even if I weren't trying to lose weight, which I'm always trying to lose weight just because babies make you gain weight. Again, I don't know if you guys know that or not. Sorry, I should stop saying that. But I gain weight when I have kids. But days when I eat poorly, and I don't get up and move around, like walk on my treadmill or walk outside or lift some weights, those days end up being really, really hard days. And I can tell when I've eaten junk food or processed food. It makes me sluggish and irritable, and those effects will stick around for several days. And so my focus this year is going to be moving more and eating well, so taking care of myself. That's just a big focus I'm going to have this year, because the time when I do I need to be able to be productive. And if I'm putting crap in, then I'm not going to be able to, get stuff done. Anyway, so those are my grandiose goals for this coming year. And if I were single and looking at myself right now, I'd be like, what the crap is wrong with you? Those are things that I do every day right now. Because, I was in college, when I was in oncology, I was in college, that's just what you did. But as a mom to little kids, I'm learning that things are just super different and and much more difficult. So I'm not going to make any specific goals for the business because I need to get my personal life in order to run a business. And so my goals are going to be to get my personal life in order so that I can run the business. And then once I've got those things set up in a way that's satisfactory, I'll be able to focus on weekly and monthly goals and then hopefully start producing books again regularly. And so just getting the basics figured out before I can focus on the bigger picture again, especially during a time when I'm unable to write most days, period. So that's pretty much what I'm going to be working on. I represent all of the scatterbrained mothers of young kids in the audience. And guys, this is our year. We're going to do it. Dang it.
All right. Yeah. So my year is, and I'm gonna be starting a new series, and I think I've 2 years ago I tried the rapid release on the urban fantasy, and I don't think the rapid release was. I don't think it was a failure because of the rapid release. I just think there was. We've discussed my postmortem on the thing. And I also have my more traditional method that I release books is the one per series per year, which we've talked about is not a great way to build momentum, although it does sort of make each individual release a little bit more of an event. So you can sort of work heavier promotion than you might otherwise do. I think I'm going to split the difference this year, and I'm going to release the books as I write them. So I'm not gonna write 3 of them and then release them all at once like I did with the urban fantasy, but I'm going to stay dedicated to a single series. So I will be releasing 3 books in the same series successively as I complete them. And I think that'll give me probably the most workable method for me to get as close as I can get to a successful rapid release without having to take 6 months off, which taking 6 months off to prepare 3 books works great if those books are a gigantic hit, but the last time I did it, they weren't. So I'm going to try to, temper the method so that I have more regular releases and I can get a better read on how to course correct along the way. Um, so I'm going to write them as quickly and as comfortably as I can. I actually already have the issue where I didn't, unlike Lindsay, I didn't reach out to my editor and make sure that I had all the editing slots I need. So my release is going to be partially based upon when I can get the editing done. But I'm not too worried about that. I wasn't expecting to do any releases early in the year on this particular project anyway. And also, I haven't decided if I'm going to start it in KU. I probably will, just because I want to have one at least success story for KU. And I've done a couple of different experiments in KU, and none of them have worked out particularly well. But I feel like I want to just, if for no other reason, prove to myself that I can make the KU thing work. But I'll do the standard pre-release on my Patreon so that people who are my wide audience will have an opportunity to read it before it eventually gets made wide everywhere when it's run its course in KU. Something else I'm looking for is I'm going to do my darndest to get my advertising chops together again, and this time maybe make it a part of my daily or weekly schedule to assess and refresh. Uh, I say that I'm going to try my very best. This is the part of my next year that I suspect will continue to be my greatest struggle. I don't know why, especially since I've been doing, the marketing podcast for so long. I don't know why I have never gotten the into the habit of advertising. I individually developed the skill. I have a reasonably good run for a little while, and then for some reason it always falls off. So I will do my very best, and I will try to keep on top of it. But this is the one where if we look back to what didn't work this year and at the end of 2021, you might hear me doing 3 paragraphs on my failed advertising schedule. And that's always a great idea, by the way, to shoot yourself in the foot right at the beginning of the year. And also, now that I've got my agenda shaping up nicely, the daily agenda shaping up because of Habitica, I think I'm going to try organizing things to segregate the book biz from the rest of my life. I have a tendency to let my workday spread through the entire day, which is fine because I break up, and because I do that Pomodoro method, I tend to take those 15-minute breaks and do things for my day. But it also means I might end up working until 3 a.m. if I get really into a groove, or if I get really behind. Either way, I might end up spending way, way, way too much time contiguous or letting it spread out and working too slowly. So I think I'm going to try to do a little bit of the banker's hours thing, where I try to not only set my word quota and get all my business stuff done, but also try to make sure that gets done before, say, 5 or 6 p.m. so that I have the rest of the day to do things that aren't book related, and to make sure that I dedicatedly stick to doing non-book related things during those times, just so that my life in general will shape up. I also should be, getting a little bit healthier and stuff like that. So if it seems strange that I have to choose to segregate a portion of my day to work on myself, but I'm going to try to do that this year so that I can be a whole person instead of just sort of a 2/3 of a person. Because yeah, it only takes a couple of 18-hour work days to grind yourself into powder, which may or may not have been something that happened earlier this year. So those are my plans for 2021, and I'm optimistic about the book releases and stuff. And I already have my to-do list for how to be better at advertising, because it turns out we keep all the notes for these shows, so I can go back and look at all of the best pieces of advice that I had marked for my own use.
All right. Gosh, I was going to ask you if you're going to try to rapid release the epic fantasy, because I'm kind of thinking like, I don't think I can do that with 150,000 word books. I mean, I write pretty fast, but still. Yeah. Okay. So I did want to, what else I was going to comment on yours on the advertising thing. That I have found, and that more so this last year or two, that if like during the launch, I'll try a bunch of ads, like 8, 10, whatever, and see kind of what works and let them run and shut off the ones that don't work that well. But, since I kind of in May, I shut off the ones that weren't working. I think I made one more since then for the Death Before Dragons book one. At a lower price to see if I could not bid as much and still get play in urban fantasies, fairly competitive, at least within sci-fi and fantasy. And yeah, I was able to, and I've kind of found that it's been set it and forget it. I'll go in like once a month or so and just make sure nothing really wonky is going on. But I feel like once you stumble across, and I'm going to say stumble, I'm honestly just doing mostly auto ads, letting them not put any copy in there, because if I put copy in there, it could possibly turn people off. Whereas if it's just the book cover, they're going to completely click based on the book cover. And then the blurb, I do better when I have a little more room to work with. So auto ads. And then I think in the beginning, every time I always try keywords, I'm like, I'm going to target these authors. I'm going to make sure I'm getting in their also bots. I want to be in that particular author's also bots. And that stuff never seems to work despite my efforts to do it. And what I find is that I do find just doing like urban fantasy, paranormal, or epic fantasy, doing the category ones, or the auto ads. I have one or two of those going to where I let it pick. You have to be careful, something, because it will target, it's like, oh, somebody searched for Lindsay Baroker. We will show Lindsay Baroker's ad. I'm like, wait a minute, they would have bought my book anyway. And we've discussed that before, but I feel like Amazon has gotten to the point where you really don't need to be putting out new ads all the time. Do a bunch, see what works, cull the ones that don't, and then like increase how much you're willing to spend each day on the ones that are working for you. And it seems to be right now that I don't know, there's like, once something's working, it seems to continue working. Sometimes people will come along, like before Christmas, I felt like bids got higher and I was seeing less ads, get less clicks and impressions. But then right after Christmas, or even probably like a few days leading up, it kind of went back to normal. Like people were cutting off their campaigns or something. But for the most part, and I'm all about that, you guys, the more set it and forget it the ads can be, the better. But I feel that part of it is just realizing too, which of your series, once you have more than one series, you'll probably also find that some of them just convert better and they're closer to the market or whatever it is. The blurb strikes home, the cover strikes home, and they do better than possibly some of your other series. So it may be worth just kind of focusing most of your ad money, especially with the pay-per-click, the expensive ads, quite frankly, on the stuff that's kind of proven. And then like with my other stuff that's especially not in KU, I try to get free Booksy every now and then. I mean, I try for BookBubs. Like I said, I didn't get that many this year, but just run some sales on those. But I just wanted to comment on that, on advertising, because I feel like there is sort of this thought out there that, oh, you got to be in there every week, like tinkering with them and trying to make them better. And you maybe want to trade off, like if you're trying to get 10 cents a bid or 20 cents a bid, you may be really struggling to get as much play as you want. So you have to decide if your time is worth that money, or could you bid 30 cents and not have to be in there all the time playing with it and just be working on the next book. And people will kind of figure that out for themselves. Let's see, as far as my things, I will say, Andrea, I get up at 6 every day. I cannot sleep in or it screws up everything. So I think that's a great goal. I don't know, people that sleep in on the weekends. I used to be like a total night owl. So it's really, I have to be really careful not to let myself slide back into that, especially in the winter when it's like dark until 8, at least here in Oregon, or 7:30. I think I was walking the dogs in the pre-dawn gloom this morning. But that's what works for me. Keeping things I have my routines. I like to keep to my routines, coffee in the morning. Then I walk the dogs and we all have breakfast together, me and my dogs. I don't have any kids, just the puppies, and then I get to work. And actually, Joe was talking about not letting it bleed into like evening and stuff. I actually had 3 days just now because I feel like with this epic fantasy, it's going to be long. So I really have to buckle down where I actually hit my word count goal by like 3:30 in the afternoon. I was like, this is amazing. Why can't I always do this? The problem is that you then resent yourself later when it's like 9 p.m. and you're still working because you didn't buckle down and get them. But I don't know. I guess we just have to appreciate the good days when they come. And I do think it's good to like have like this is my time off or this is my exercise time. I'm always careful to get that stuff in. I've had so many issues over the years that I kind of have to be careful. Like I can't screw around with the diet. I do like a paleo diet. I don't eat much sugar, and it's not because I'm so great. It's because I've had so many issues, and having a good diet is what has helped a lot. But as far as my work business goals, for those who are still listening to the podcast as we ramble on about our diets and our sleep schedules, um, since I am opting to do the epic fantasy series this year with longer books than average, I'm sure there won't be as many releases, and I doubt the income will be as good. Page reads might help, but I don't think they're going to make up for fewer purchases and fewer books out. But sometimes you just have to do what the muse wants. And at this point, fortunately, I can afford to do like more of the passion projects instead of always thinking like, well, how do I release a book a month? How do I keep the money flowing in? And of course, I hope the epic fantasy does well. But it's definitely, I have to admit, it has crossed my mind to go, maybe I should just do a spin-off of the urban fantasy series, mostly because they're easier to write and because the series was fun. I did enjoy doing it, even if that's not my, I didn't do super amazing with the launch of the new series, but they were pretty fun. And like I said, a lot easier to write. So that may be something, I think I already said this, or I thought about saying that, but if you're struggling with some epic fantasy or some historical tome that's like 200,000 words, maybe set that aside, write something easy where you can actually write 3 books fairly quickly, and you might have fun and then come back to it and enjoy that stuff. But I will say though, I've decided to do the urban or the epic fantasy because I do actually have a larger fan base in the sort of secondary world made up fantasy stuff. So I know they've been waiting for something new. And if I find those too difficult, I have some sort of tentative plans to kind of jump around into, like I was saying, older stuff and maybe do a one-off here and there. Yeah, because I'm getting to the point where I have so many worlds that I'm starting to lose track. It's like hard to keep track of everything, and I know the readers really want to see the older stuff. So it's always like, can I do it as a new release so that it's not relying on somebody having read 8 books already in the series to try the new one. Beyond that, as far as kind of marketing and stuff goes, my main goal for 2021 and beyond is to kind of continue doing what I know works, but also try something new here and there. It's really easy to get in the rut of Amazon ads, building up the newsletter, and for me, trying to do the rapid release of a new series every year. And honestly, it's because that stuff all works for me. I've tried a lot of things over the years and seen things come and go, and those work. Free book one still works pretty well for me with the wide stuff that's not in KU. But new things pop up every year, and I don't want to waste a lot of time on something that isn't yet proven. But I think it's also good to try some things that every other author isn't already doing right now, if only because there's a lot less competition then. And if you stumble across something that works, you've got the early mover advantage. So I'm going to try to be open to poking around, seeing what's out there, trying new things. And of course, I like to share with you guys. So if I ever find anything brilliant, last year I tried Goodreads giveaways for the first time in like 8 years. And it's like, maybe it, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. I sell enough books regularly that it's really hard to see if something moves the dial. So it's actually easier if you've got some series that isn't hardly selling at all to go in and see if some marketing thing is effective or it isn't, until the day when Amazon and the other bookstores actually let us know where the sales came from. We're stuck guessing unless it was an affiliate link. The last thing I want to continue to do is I opened up talking about how I did a free Christmas bonus story, and I want to always remind myself to continue doing those free bonus things for my existing readers and to try to keep them give them extra stuff, make them happy. This was such a crappy year for so many people. I got so many nice emails this year about like, thank you, your books made me laugh for a little bit and were really helpful during this time. So I was glad I was putting out a lot of books in a pretty funny series, actually. So like I said, it ended up being a good year for that particular series. And I think it is easy to get into the mindset of like, well, I've got a fan base now, so it makes more sense to charge for everything and make money from everything. But the readers really do value the bonus stuff in the series they've come to love. And yes, some of it's calculated, like I want you to join my newsletter to get these bonuses. But sometimes I think just doing these sort of things that they enjoy, that's free at no cost, it really makes them want to help you by sharing your work with others and raving about it online. And we always have to remember that if you're fortunate enough to grow a fan base and get readers that enjoy your work, it's always way easier to sell new books to existing readers who already love your work than to kind of get all new readers off a cold call, or just basically what an Amazon ad or a Facebook ad is. So it's just, I have to remind myself of that, because sometimes I resent, I'm like, why did I decide I'm going to do this? I got a date with the editor for the next novel. I shouldn't be wasting 2 days on this bonus story. But I think it's worth it keeping it in mind, because the readers really do like that stuff. All right, I think that is it. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Joe, did you want to wrap up? I wrote it. You're hosting the show today. I put it in the wrong color for the closing.
Well, yeah, I'll wrap it up. But do you guys have any additional thoughts before I do so?
Nope.
Andrea will be up at 6 o'clock tomorrow to walk her dogs, and I'll feed her kids. We'll trade off.
Yeah, that would be actually really great. I might pay you like 25 cents too.
Ooh, to feed, there's like 3 of them. I might ask for like $2. That's a lot.
All right. So thank you for listening, and thank you to Joshua Pearson for producing the show. You can find the show notes or leave a comment or a question at Six Figure Authors with the number 6. And thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
So long, everybody.